December 11, 1964. 3:15 a.m. The Hacienda Motel, Los Angeles. The neon sign flickers against the dark sky, casting eerie shadows across the empty parking lot. In room 3, the silence is shattered by 3 gunshot blasts that echo through the night like thunder. When the police arrive, they find the body of a man wearing only a sport coat and shoes lying in a pool of blood on the cold linoleum floor. His wallet is missing, his expensive jewelry gone. But this isn't just any man. This is Sam Cooke, the 33-year-old king of soul, whose velvet voice had serenaded millions and whose songs were becoming anthems of the civil rights movement. The official report reads, "Justifiable homicide." The motel manager, Bertha Franklin, claims she shot in self-defense when Cooke broke down her door, demanding to know where a woman had gone. But as news of his death spreads like wildfire across America, fans, friends, and family refuse to accept the official story. Something doesn't add up. How does a man who crooned "You Send Me" with such tenderness end up dead in a seedy motel, allegedly attacking an elderly woman? How does someone who sang "A Change Is Gonna Come," a song that would become the unofficial anthem of the civil rights movement, meet such a violent, inexplicable end? The contradictions are staggering. Witnesses describe seeing Cooke earlier that evening, well-dressed and in good spirits at a nearby nightclub. Friends say he was planning to focus more on civil rights activism and had been receiving death threats. His business manager insists there was no reason for him to be at such a location. The woman he was allegedly with that night has vanished without a trace. Was this really a case of mistaken identity and tragic circumstances? Or was something far more sinister at play, something that powerful forces wanted buried with the man they called Mr. Soul? But to understand how it all ended, we must first understand how it all began. January 22nd, 1931. Clarksdale, Mississippi. The air is thick with the scent of cotton fields and the sound of gospel hymns drifting from shotgun houses. In one of these humble homes, Annie Mae and Charles Cooke welcomed their 5th child into the world, a boy they named Samuel Cooke, though the world would later know him as Sam Cooke. The Mississippi Delta in the 1930s was a place where dreams seemed as distant as the horizon. Sharecropping families lived in poverty, bound by both economic hardship and the suffocating weight of Jim Crow laws. But in the Cooke household, something magical happened every Sunday morning. Annie Mae would gather her 8 children around an old upright piano, and their voices would blend in perfect harmony, transforming their small home into a sanctuary of hope. Young Sam possessed something extraordinary, a voice that seemed to carry the pain and promise of his entire community. By age 6, he was already leading songs at the family's dinner table, his clear, pure tone cutting through the air like a ray of sunlight through storm clouds. His siblings would later recall how Sam never just sang words. He seemed to live them, to breathe life into every note. When Sam was 2, the family made the great migration north to Chicago, joining hundreds of thousands of African Americans fleeing the harsh realities of the segregated South. They settled in Bronzeville, a vibrant community where blues clubs and gospel churches stood side by side, creating a unique musical ecosystem that would profoundly shape young Sam's artistic consciousness. The Cooke children formed a gospel group called the Singing Children, performing at church gatherings throughout Chicago. Sam, even as a child, displayed an uncanny ability to connect with audiences. His voice carried an emotional depth that seemed impossible for someone so young. Church elders would shake their heads in amazement, whispering that this boy had been touched by something divine. But beneath the surface of this musical prodigy was a child who understood struggle intimately. The family often went to bed hungry. Sam's father worked multiple jobs, as a minister, as a laborer, as anything that would put food on the table. Young Sam learned early that talent alone wasn't enough. Survival required intelligence, determination, and an unwavering belief in oneself. At school, Sam was known for his charm and confidence. Teachers noted his quick wit and natural leadership abilities. But it was during church services that his true nature emerged. When Sam stepped up to sing, the entire congregation fell silent. His voice had a quality that seemed to reach directly into people's souls, offering comfort to the weary and hope to the hopeless. Could their early childhood experiences have laid the foundation for later triumphs or tragedies? In Sam's case, those formative years in Chicago's gospel community instilled in him both a deep spiritual foundation and an acute understanding of music as a vehicle for emotional truth. Little did anyone know that this young boy with the angelic voice would one day challenge not just musical conventions, but the very fabric of American society itself. By his teenage years, Sam had developed a reputation throughout Chicago's gospel circuit. His voice was maturing into something unprecedented, smooth as silk yet powerful as thunder, capable of conveying both intimate vulnerability and commanding authority. The seeds of greatness were already sprouting, but so too were the complexities that would define his entire life. The year 1950 marked a pivotal moment that would launch Sam Cooke from local gospel prodigy to national sensation. At just 19 years old, he received an invitation that would change everything. The legendary Soul Stirrers, one of the most respected gospel groups in America, wanted him as their new lead singer. The Soul Stirrers were gospel royalty. For nearly 2 decades, they had been the standard bearers of the genre, with their former lead singer, R.H. Harris, setting the bar impossibly high. When Harris left the group, they needed someone extraordinary to fill his shoes. They found that person in young Sam Cooke. But stepping into this role meant more than just singing. It meant carrying the hopes and expectations of an entire community. Gospel music in the 1950s wasn't just entertainment. It was spiritual sustenance for African Americans facing daily humiliation and violence under Jim Crow. When Sam stepped onto stages across the South, he wasn't just performing. He was offering healing to people who had precious little reason for hope. The young singer threw himself into this responsibility with fierce dedication. He studied every aspect of performance, from breath control to stage presence. He analyzed the great gospel singers who came before him, learning their techniques while developing his own unique style. But most importantly, he connected with audiences on a profound emotional level that transcended mere technical skill. Sam's early recordings with the Soul Stirrers reveal an artist already pushing boundaries. His version of Jesus Gave Me Water showcased a vocal approach that was simultaneously traditional and revolutionary. He maintained gospel's spiritual intensity while introducing a smoother, more melodic sensibility that would later define soul music. Critics and fans began to take notice. This young man was something special. But success in gospel music came with strict limitations. The genre's conservative gatekeepers demanded spiritual purity both in music and personal conduct. Performers were expected to live as moral exemplars, avoiding the temptations of secular entertainment. For someone with Sam's ambition and natural charisma, these constraints began to feel increasingly restrictive. The tension came to a head during a 1956 recording session. Sam had written a love song called Lovable that he desperately wanted to record. The melody was intoxicating, the lyrics romantic rather than spiritual. It was everything gospel music wasn't supposed to be. When he proposed recording it, the Soul Stirrers management was horrified. Gospel singers didn't make love songs, it was career suicide. But Sam saw something they couldn't. He saw the future of popular music. He recognized that the emotional intensity of gospel could be channeled into secular themes, creating something entirely new. Against all advice, he recorded Lovable under the pseudonym Dale Cook, hoping to test the waters without destroying his gospel career. The song became a moderate hit, proving Sam's instincts correct. But it also created an impossible situation. How could he continue as a gospel singer while his heart yearned to explore broader musical territories? The answer came in one of the most difficult decisions of his life. He would leave the Soul Stirrers and venture into the uncertain world of popular music. Was the success they achieved truly worth all the pain they endured? For Sam, the choice to abandon gospel security for pop music uncertainty represented more than a career decision. It was a statement about artistic freedom and the right to evolve. But it also meant disappointing fans, friends, and mentors who had invested in his gospel career. The price of growth, he was learning, was often measured in broken relationships and shattered expectations. As 1957 dawned, Sam Cooke stood at a crossroads that would define not just his career, but the entire trajectory of American popular music. The young man who had once been content to sing for Sunday congregations was about to take his message to the world stage. The transformation from gospel sensation to pop star should have been impossible. In 1957, the music industry was rigidly segregated, with clear boundaries between sacred and secular, black and white, acceptable and dangerous. Sam Cooke was about to shatter every single one of those boundaries. His first pop single, You Send Me, was recorded in a modest studio with a budget so small that the entire session had to be completed in just a few hours. The song itself was deceptively simple, a tender love ballad that showcased Sam's remarkable vocal range and emotional depth. But what made it revolutionary was how it bridged worlds that had never been connected before. You Send Me carried the spiritual intensity of gospel music into the realm of romantic love. Sam's vocal delivery maintained the call and response patterns of church singing while expressing purely secular emotions. It was as if he had discovered a secret language that could speak to both the heart and the soul simultaneously. When the song was released, radio stations weren't sure how to categorize it. It was too sophisticated for typical rhythm and blues, too soulful for mainstream pop, and too secular for gospel. But audiences didn't care about categories. They simply knew they were hearing something extraordinary. Within weeks, You Send Me had climbed to #1 on both the pop and R&B charts, making Sam Cooke the first artist to achieve this feat with a debut single. The success opened doors that had been locked to African-American artists for decades. Suddenly, Sam was performing on national television shows, headlining major venues and commanding fees that rivaled the biggest white stars. But more importantly, he was proving that authentic black artistry could find mainstream acceptance without compromising its essential character. His follow-up hits, Wonderful World, Chain Gang, and Cupid, established him as more than a one-hit wonder. Each song demonstrated different facets of his artistry: intellectual curiosity, social consciousness, and romantic vulnerability. Sam wasn't just singing. He was creating a new archetype of the African-American entertainer. Sophisticated, multifaceted, and unapologetically himself. Behind the scenes, Sam was making moves that were even more revolutionary. Frustrated by the exploitative contracts that trapped so many black artists, he negotiated unprecedented creative and financial control over his work. He insisted on owning his master recordings, choosing his own material, and having input on marketing strategies. These demands were virtually unheard of for any recording artist, let alone a young black man in the Jim Crow era. His business acumen extended beyond his own career. In 1961, Sam founded SAR Records, becoming one of the first African-American artists to own a record label. His goal wasn't just personal wealth, but the creation of opportunities for other black artists who had been marginalized by the mainstream industry. He signed and developed acts like the Valentinos, Mel Carter, and Johnny Taylor, providing them with the kind of support and respect that he had struggled to find in his early career. But perhaps Sam's most significant achievement during this period was his emergence as a voice for social change. Unlike many entertainers who avoided controversial topics, Sam began incorporating subtle messages about civil rights and racial equality into his music. His 1960 song Chain Gang wasn't just about prisoners. It was about the economic bondage that trapped African Americans in cycles of poverty and discrimination. The entertainment industry watched nervously as Sam's influence grew. Here was a black artist who refused to be controlled, categorized, or contained. He performed for integrated audiences in the South, despite death threats and boycott attempts. He used his platform to speak out against segregation, even when it cost him bookings and record sales. He was becoming more than an entertainer. He was becoming a symbol of black pride and self-determination. Was their success really worth the pain they endured? For Sam, the answer seemed clear. The pain of leaving gospel music behind was balanced by the joy of reaching millions with his message. The stress of fighting for creative control was offset by the satisfaction of building something unprecedented. But the true cost of his success was yet to be revealed. As 1963 approached, Sam Cooke had achieved everything a popular entertainer could dream of. He had conquered the charts, broken down racial barriers, and built a business empire. But his greatest triumph, and his most dangerous moment, was yet to come. The young man who had once sung in church choirs was about to create a song that would become the anthem of a generation fighting for freedom. By 1963, Sam Cooke had reached the summit of popular music. His mansion in Los Angeles was a testament to his success. Sprawling grounds, luxurious furnishings, and a state-of-the-art recording studio where he could create without interference. From the outside, he appeared to have everything: wealth, fame, creative freedom, and the respect of his peers. But behind the glamorous facade, Sam was grappling with pressures that would have crushed a lesser man. The civil rights movement was reaching a boiling point, and as one of the most visible African-American entertainers in America, he faced constant pressure to take a stand. Conservative fans wanted him to stay out of politics, while activists demanded he use his platform more aggressively. Every decision carried enormous stakes. The weight of representation was crushing. When Sam appeared on television shows, he wasn't just representing himself. He was representing his entire race to white audiences who might have no other exposure to successful black Americans. One wrong move, one controversial statement, one moment of human fallibility could set back the cause of civil rights by years. The pressure manifested itself in increasingly erratic behavior. Friends noticed that Sam was drinking more heavily, staying up later, and showing signs of the paranoia that often accompanies fame. He began surrounding himself with bodyguards and yes-men, creating a barrier between himself and the authentic relationships that had once sustained him. His marriage to Barbara Campbell, once a source of strength and stability, began to show cracks under the strain. The demands of his career kept him away from home for months at a time, while the constant scrutiny of the media made normal family life impossible. Barbara found herself raising their children essentially as a single mother while managing the complex emotions of being married to a public figure who belonged more to his audience than to his family. The isolation of fame was perhaps the cruelest irony of Sam's success. The man whose voice brought comfort to millions found himself increasingly alone. He could fill stadiums with devoted fans but couldn't find genuine intimacy in his personal relationships. Every friendship was complicated by questions of motive. Every romantic encounter was shadowed by the possibility of exploitation or betrayal. Yet it was precisely during this period of personal turmoil that Sam created his most enduring artistic achievements. His performances took on a new intensity, as if he was channeling all of his inner conflict into his music. Songs like Another Saturday Night revealed the loneliness behind his public persona, while Good News hinted at his deeper spiritual struggles. The contradiction between his public image and private reality became increasingly stark. Audiences saw a confident, charismatic entertainer who seemed to have conquered the world, but those closest to him witnessed a man wrestling with doubts, fears, and the growing sense that his success might ultimately be meaningless if it didn't contribute to something larger than himself. This internal struggle came to a head during a 1963 performance at the Copacabana in New York. As Sam looked out at the audience, predominantly white, wealthy, and comfortable, he was struck by a disturbing realization. His music was providing entertainment for people who might very well support the segregation and discrimination that made life hell for millions of African Americans. Was he helping the cause of civil rights? Or was he simply a convenient way for white liberals to feel good about themselves without actually changing anything? The question haunted him. In interviews, he began speaking more openly about racial issues despite warnings from his management team that political statements could damage his career. He started donating significant portions of his income to civil rights organizations, though he kept these contributions largely secret to avoid backlash from conservative fans. Behind all that glamour, was there an unbearable loneliness that nobody saw? The answer for Sam Cooke was undoubtedly yes. The very qualities that made him successful, his sensitivity, his intelligence, his ability to feel deeply, also made him acutely aware of the isolation that fame imposed. He was surrounded by people but increasingly alone with his thoughts and fears. As 1963 drew to a close, Sam was about to face the greatest challenge of his career. An incident in Louisiana would force him to confront the brutal realities of American racism and inspire him to create the song that would define his legacy. But it would also set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately lead to his mysterious death. October 8, 1963. The Red Rocks Cafe in Shreveport, Louisiana. Sam Cooke and his entourage arrived for what should have been a routine performance at a venue that had specifically advertised the show to both black and white audiences. Instead, they encounter a scene that would haunt Sam for the rest of his life and inspire one of the most important songs in American history. Despite advance publicity promising an integrated show, local authorities had other plans. At the last minute, they erected a rope down the middle of the venue, segregating the audience by race. White patrons were given preferred seating near the stage, while black fans, many of whom had driven hours to see their hero perform, were relegated to a cramped section at the back. Sam's initial reaction was disbelief, followed by a rage so intense that witnesses feared he might walk off stage. Here he was, an internationally successful recording artist, being treated like a second-class citizen in his own country. The humiliation was complete when local police informed him that he and his band would not be allowed to stay in any of Shreveport's white hotels despite their celebrity status. The incident crystallized everything Sam had been feeling about the contradiction between his professional success and his status as an African American in Jim Crow America. No amount of fame or fortune could protect him from the systematic dehumanization of segregation. In that moment, the carefully constructed boundaries between entertainment and activism collapsed. But rather than channeling his anger into a public confrontation that could have ended his career, Sam did something far more powerful. He went home and wrote, "A Change Is Gonna Come." The song that emerged from his pain was unlike anything in popular music. Built on a foundation of gospel chord progressions and classical orchestration, "A Change Is Gonna Come" was both deeply personal and universally resonant. Sam's vocal performance was a masterclass in controlled emotion, every note carrying the weight of generations of suffering while maintaining an unshakable faith in eventual justice. The lyrics were revolutionary in their directness. Unlike most popular songs of the era that dealt with race through metaphor and suggestion, Sam confronted segregation head-on. I was born by the river in a little tent. And oh, just like the river, I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming. But I know a change is gonna come. Oh yes, it will. Recording the song was an emotional ordeal that pushed Sam to his artistic limits. Musicians who worked on the session later described the studio atmosphere as electric with tension and possibility. Sam's vocal takes were so emotionally intense that several musicians were moved to tears. The final version captured lightning in a bottle, a perfect fusion of artistic excellence and social consciousness. But releasing the song represented an enormous risk. Sam's management team warned him that radio stations might blacklist it, concert promoters might cancel bookings, and record sales could plummet. The entertainment industry in 1964 was not ready for such explicit political content from a popular artist, especially an African-American one. Sam wrestled with the decision for months. He understood that a change is gonna come would irrevocably alter his public image and possibly his career trajectory. No longer would he be able to remain safely above the political fray. The song would mark him as a civil rights activist, whether he wanted that label or not. The tipping point came in February 1964, when Sam appeared on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. During his performance of the song, the studio audience sat in stunned silence, not from lack of appreciation, but from the recognition that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Popular entertainment had never carried such explicit social commentary, and the power of Sam's performance made it impossible to ignore. The song's impact was immediate and profound. Civil rights leaders embraced it as an anthem, with Martin Luther King Jr. reportedly playing it repeatedly during the planning stages of the March on Washington. But the backlash was equally intense. Sam began receiving death threats from white supremacists who saw the song as dangerous propaganda. Some radio stations banned it outright, while others played it only during late-night hours when their audience was smaller. The controversy surrounding "A Change Is Gonna Come" marked a fundamental shift in Sam's life and career. He could no longer maintain the careful balance between mainstream acceptance and authentic expression that had defined his success. Every public appearance became a political statement, every song a potential flashpoint for controversy. Did this tragic event mark their downfall, or was it simply the tipping point of deeper problems? For Sam, the creation of "A Change Is Gonna Come" represented both his greatest artistic achievement and the beginning of a new phase of his life that would be marked by increased scrutiny, greater danger, and ultimately, a mysterious death that would fuel conspiracy theories for decades. As 1964 progressed, Sam found himself at the center of a cultural revolution that he had helped create but could no longer control. The young man who had once sought only to entertain was now carrying the hopes and fears of an entire movement for social justice. The success of "A Change Is Gonna Come" transformed Sam Cooke from entertainer to icon. But the weight of that transformation proved almost unbearable. As civil rights activism intensified throughout 1964, Sam found himself pulled deeper into a world where every word carried life or death consequences, and where the line between artistry and activism had completely disappeared. The death threats became a constant presence in his life. FBI files later revealed that federal agents were monitoring his activities, viewing him as a potential threat to social stability. Phone calls to his home often consisted of nothing but racial slurs and promises of violence. His family lived in constant fear, never knowing whether a trip to the grocery store or a night out might end in tragedy. But perhaps even more challenging than external threats was the internal pressure Sam felt to live up to his new role as a voice for his people. The man who had once been content to sing love songs now felt obligated to address every injustice, to comment on every development in the civil rights struggle. The freedom that had initially attracted him to popular music was being replaced by a sense of duty that was both inspiring and crushing. His relationship with Barbara became increasingly strained as the demands of activism competed with family responsibilities. She watched helplessly as the man she married became consumed by forces beyond his control. Their conversations, once filled with dreams and laughter, now revolved around security concerns and political strategy. The intimate partnership that had sustained them both was being sacrificed on the altar of public service. Sam's business ventures began to suffer as he devoted more time and energy to civil rights causes. SAR Records, once his pride and joy, was struggling financially as he poured resources into supporting other artists and activist organizations. His perfectionist approach to recording, previously an asset, became a liability as he obsessed over every song's potential political implications. The music industry responded to his transformation with a mixture of admiration and concern. While many respected his courage in addressing controversial topics, others worried that he was destroying the broad-based appeal that had made him a crossover success. Booking agents reported difficulty securing venues for his performances as promoters feared protests or violence. Yet it was during this period of maximum pressure that Sam created some of his most powerful work. Songs like Shot of Love and Shake revealed an artist pushing the boundaries of soul music while maintaining his commitment to social consciousness. His live performances took on an evangelical intensity, as he seemed to be preaching as much as singing. The contradiction between his public mission and private struggles became increasingly apparent to those closest to him. Friends noticed that Sam was drinking more heavily and sleeping less. The easy charm that had once defined his personality was being replaced by a harder edge that reflected the brutal realities he was confronting daily. His financial situation, despite his success, was becoming increasingly precarious. The combination of reduced bookings, expensive security measures, and generous donations to civil rights causes had seriously impacted his income. He was forced to take on performances he might have previously declined, sometimes in venues where his safety couldn't be guaranteed. The isolation of his position was perhaps the most difficult aspect to bear. While other entertainers could retreat into private life when controversy arose, Sam found no such escape. Every public appearance was analyzed for its political implications, every song dissected for hidden meanings. The spontaneity and joy that had originally drawn him to music were being systematically stripped away. His relationship with other artists became complicated by his activist stance. Some, like Harry Belafonte and Sidney Poitier, applauded his courage and joined him in supporting civil rights causes. Others, particularly those who had achieved crossover success, worried that his approach might trigger a backlash that would hurt all African-American entertainers. By late 1964, Sam was exhibiting signs of severe stress and paranoia. He had begun carrying a gun for protection and often changed his travel plans at the last minute to avoid potential threats. The man who had once moved through the world with supreme confidence now lived in constant fear of assassination. The pressure was compounded by his growing awareness that "a change is gonna come" had taken on a life of its own beyond his control. The song was being used by civil rights organizations, played at protests and rallies, and interpreted in ways that sometimes went far beyond his original intentions. He had created something powerful and important, but he was no longer its master. Can anyone ever truly escape from the shadow of their darkest moments? For Sam, the answer was increasingly unclear. The success that had once liberated him from the constraints of gospel music was now trapping him in expectations and obligations that threatened to consume his humanity. As December 1964 approached, Sam Cooke stood at another crossroads. The choices he made in the coming weeks would determine not only his own fate but also his legacy as an artist and activist. The young man who had dreamed of changing the world through music was about to discover that some changes exact a price higher than anyone should have to pay. The final weeks of November 1964 found Sam Cooke in a state of profound exhaustion and growing paranoia. The relentless pressure of maintaining his dual roles as entertainer and activist had taken a devastating toll on both his physical health and mental stability. Those closest to him noticed dramatic changes in his behavior. The easy confidence that had once been his trademark was being replaced by suspicious glances and sudden mood swings. His home in Los Angeles, once a sanctuary where he could escape the pressures of fame, had become another source of anxiety. Security systems were installed and upgraded repeatedly, but Sam never felt truly safe. He would often pace the halls at night, unable to sleep, consumed by fears that enemies were closing in from all directions. The financial pressures that had been building throughout the year reached a critical point. Despite his continued popularity, the combination of reduced bookings, expensive security measures, and his generous support of civil rights causes had severely strained his resources. For the first time in years, Sam was facing the possibility of serious financial hardship. His marriage to Barbara was hanging by a thread. The constant stress, the security concerns, and Sam's increasingly erratic behavior had created an atmosphere of tension that was impossible to ignore. Their children, once the center of Sam's world, now saw their father primarily as a distant figure consumed by forces they couldn't understand. But perhaps most troubling was Sam's growing sense that his activist stance had made him expendable in the eyes of powerful interests. He had begun to suspect that his phone was tapped, his movements monitored, and his associates investigated. Whether these suspicions were justified or products of stress-induced paranoia, they reflected the very real dangers faced by prominent civil rights supporters in the volatile America of 1964. His decision to reduce his public appearances wasn't entirely voluntary. Death threats had become so numerous and specific that his security team strongly advised limiting his exposure. The man who had once thrived on connecting with live audiences now found himself increasingly isolated, performing primarily in carefully controlled environments with extensive security measures. Sam's relationship with his record label became another source of stress. Company executives, concerned about the commercial impact of his political activism, pressured him to return to more mainstream material. They argued that his social consciousness was admirable, but that his primary responsibility was to his fans and shareholders. The suggestion that he toned down his message for commercial reasons infuriated Sam, who saw it as a betrayal of everything he had fought to achieve. The artistic community's response to his activism was mixed, creating additional isolation. While some applauded his courage, others worried that his approach was too confrontational and might provoke a backlash that would hurt all African American entertainers. The unity he had hoped to inspire seemed increasingly elusive. His health, both physical and mental, was deteriorating rapidly. The stress of constant vigilance, combined with his increased alcohol consumption and irregular eating habits, was taking a visible toll. Friends who hadn't seen him in months were shocked by his appearance. The vital, charismatic performer they remembered seemed to be wasting away before their eyes. The music that had once brought him joy was becoming increasingly difficult to create. Studio sessions that had previously been collaborative and spontaneous now felt forced and artificial. Sam's perfectionism, always intense, became obsessive as he struggled to find authentic expression in an environment where every word would be analyzed for political content. His business ventures, particularly SAR Records, were suffering from his distraction and the general atmosphere of controversy surrounding his name. Artists he had nurtured were struggling to find commercial success, partly because of their association with his increasingly controversial brand. The irony of his situation was not lost on Sam. The success of "A Change Is Gonna Come" had made him more influential than ever, but it had also made him more vulnerable. Every achievement seemed to come with corresponding dangers that threatened not only his career but his life. Were these final decisions acts of surrender or courageous acts of self-preservation? For Sam, the answer was complicated. His decision to step back from public activism wasn't driven by cowardice, but by a growing recognition that his effectiveness as an agent of change was being compromised by the very success that had given him a platform in the first place. As December 1964 began, Sam was contemplating dramatic changes to his life and career. He spoke privately about possibly relocating his family to Europe, where racial tensions were less intense and where he might find the peace that had become impossible in America. Other plans included scaling back his performance schedule and focusing more on behind-the-scenes work in the music industry. But fate would not allow him the luxury of a gradual transition. The events of December 11, 1964 would ensure that Sam Cooke's story would end not with a peaceful retirement, but with a mystery that would fuel speculation and conspiracy theories for generations to come. December 11, 1964, 10:30 p.m. The Martoni's restaurant in Hollywood buzzes with the usual Friday night crowd of entertainment industry insiders, aspiring actors, and well-dressed couples enjoying expensive Italian cuisine. At a corner table, Sam Cooke sits with his business associates, appearing relaxed for the first time in months. The dim lighting cannot hide the toll that recent stresses have taken on his once youthful face, but tonight he seems determined to recapture some semblance of normalcy. What happens next would become one of the most disputed sequences of events in entertainment history. According to the official police report, Sam left Martoni's with a 22-year-old woman named Elisa Boyer, whom he had apparently met that evening. They drove to a nearby nightclub called PJ's, where they spent several hours drinking and talking. Around 2 a.m., Sam allegedly suggested they go to his apartment, but Boyer claimed she convinced him to stop at the Hacienda Motel instead. The Hacienda Motel was not the kind of establishment where a star of Sam's caliber would typically be found. Located in a rundown section of South Los Angeles, it catered to transients, prostitutes, and people seeking anonymity for illicit activities. For someone as image-conscious as Sam Cooke, visiting such a place represented either an act of desperation or evidence that the official story was fundamentally flawed. According to Boyer's testimony, Sam registered at the motel under a false name and paid for room 3. Once inside, she claimed his demeanor changed dramatically. He became aggressive and demanding, insisting on sexual relations despite her protests. In her version of events, she managed to escape from the room while Sam was in the bathroom, grabbing his clothes and car keys in her haste to flee. But Boyer's story contained numerous inconsistencies that would fuel decades of speculation. Why would a successful entertainer like Sam risk his reputation at such a seedy location? How did a young woman manage to overpower a man and escape with his belongings? Most troubling of all, why did Boyer disappear completely after giving her initial statement to police, never to be seen or heard from again? The next sequence of events was even more bizarre. According to motel manager Bertha Franklin, Sam appeared at her office door wearing only a sport coat and shoes, demanding to know where the girl had gone. Franklin, a 55-year-old woman, claimed that Sam broke down her door and attacked her when she refused to provide information about Boyer's whereabouts. Franklin's account painted Sam as a violent, irrational aggressor who left her no choice but to defend herself. She grabbed a .22 caliber pistol from her desk and fired 3 shots, 2 of which struck Sam in the chest. He allegedly continued to advance toward her even after being shot, forcing her to hit him over the head with a broomstick before he finally collapsed. But this version of events raised even more questions than Boyer's testimony. How does a 33-year-old man in peak physical condition get overpowered by a middle-aged woman? Why would Sam, known for his intelligence and self-control, behave so irrationally? Most importantly, why were there no witnesses to corroborate any aspect of the official story? The police investigation that followed was cursory at best and suspicious at worst. Detectives spent less than 3 hours at the scene before concluding that Franklin had acted in justifiable self-defense. No thorough search was conducted for additional evidence, no background checks were performed on the key witnesses, and no attempt was made to verify the numerous inconsistencies in their testimonies. Sam's autopsy revealed additional mysteries. Beyond the gunshot wounds, his body showed signs of violence that weren't explained by Franklin's account of the shooting. His hands were badly bruised, suggesting a struggle, and there were injuries to his head that were inconsistent with being struck by a broomstick. Most puzzling of all, the trajectory of the bullet seemed wrong for someone who was allegedly charging forward when shot. The reaction of Sam's family and friends was immediate and unified. They refused to believe the official story. Barbara Cooke, despite the problems in their marriage, insisted that the man she knew would never behave as described in the police report. Fellow entertainers like Ray Charles and Lou Rawls expressed similar skepticism, arguing that Sam was too intelligent and self-aware to put himself in such a compromising situation. The funeral, held on December 18th at Mount Sinai Baptist Church in Los Angeles, drew thousands of mourners and revealed the enormous impact Sam had made in his brief 33 years. Fans lined the streets for blocks, many weeping openly as his casket was carried from the church. The service featured performances by some of the biggest names in gospel and popular music, all paying tribute to a man they insisted had been silenced at the peak of his powers. But even as his body was laid to rest, the questions surrounding Sam's death continued to multiply. Investigative journalists began uncovering evidence that suggested a far more complex story than the official version. They discovered that Elisa Boyer had a criminal record and connections to organized crime figures. They found inconsistencies in the timeline of events and discrepancies between witness statements and physical evidence. Most intriguingly, they uncovered possible motives for Sam's murder that had nothing to do with a random encounter at a restaurant. His activism had made him enemies among white supremacists who viewed him as a dangerous agitator. His business dealings had put him at odds with powerful industry figures who resented his independence and success. His vocal support for civil rights had attracted the attention of federal agencies that routinely monitored and harassed prominent African American activists. The theory that gained the most traction among conspiracy researchers was that Sam had been lured to the motel as part of an elaborate setup. In this scenario, Boyer was working with organized crime figures and possibly government agents to eliminate a man whose influence was seen as threatening to the status quo. The crude nature of the cover-up, they argued, reflected the desperation of people who needed Sam dead but hadn't planned the operation carefully enough to avoid obvious inconsistencies. Was their death as straightforward as reported, or were powerful hidden forces involved? The evidence that emerged in the years following Sam's death suggests that the truth was far more complex and sinister than the official story indicated. The man who sang about change coming to America may have become a victim of the very forces he was trying to challenge. But perhaps the most tragic aspect of Sam Cooke's death was how it robbed the world of an artist who was just hitting his stride. At 33, he was at the peak of his creative powers, with plans for new musical directions and continued activism. The songs he never got to write, the barriers he never got to break, the changes he never got to inspire, these represent losses that extend far beyond the entertainment industry. The legacy Sam left behind was complex and contradictory, much like the man himself. A Change Is Gonna Come did indeed become an anthem of the civil rights movement, played at countless rallies and inspiring generations of activists. His business innovations paved the way for future artists to maintain control over their careers and creative output. His crossover success proved that authentic African-American artistry could find mainstream acceptance without compromising its essential character. Yet questions about his death continue to resonate more than half a century later. New evidence occasionally surfaces, witnesses sometimes recant their stories, and researchers continue to uncover documents that cast doubt on the official narrative. The truth about what happened at the Hacienda Motel may never be fully known, but the search for answers has itself become part of Sam's enduring legacy. What hidden secrets might still remain untold behind their public image? In Sam's case, the secrets may involve not just the circumstances of his death, but the full extent of his influence on American culture and the forces that may have conspired to silence him. The young man who began his journey singing gospel in Chicago churches ended up changing the sound of popular music, challenging racial barriers, and possibly paying the ultimate price for daring to envision an America that lived up to its highest ideals. Today, when "A Change Is Gonna Come" plays at civil rights commemorations or during moments of national reflection on racial justice, it serves as both a tribute to Sam's vision and a reminder of how much that vision cost him. The song that was born from his pain at being segregated in Louisiana became a prophetic statement about America's capacity for transformation. A transformation that Sam himself would not live to see but helped make possible through his art, his courage, and ultimately, his sacrifice.